Morning. Again, I'm a storyteller. And what has been going on in the media for the last couple of days really makes me want to tell a story. Because I don't believe anything the media reports. There are a lot of questions need to be asked. Because a lot of it really doesn't make any sense. But I'm a fortunate man. I wrote an article yesterday talking about why I love black women. And I started with my grandmother. I remember sitting at my grandmother's feet when I was about maybe 3-4 years old. Now, my grandmother's mother was Pamunkey Cherokee. My grandmother's father was a Baptist minister. Baptist ministers didn't lie as much as they do now. My grandmother sat down and told me the story of Nat Turner, who was also a minister. And she talked about how Nat Turner met in a church and he asked questions. He asked of slaves, how many of you want to be free? Everybody, he said, and those who want to be free, I want you to all stand up because I want to do a little body count here. They all stood up. Then he said, how many of you are willing to die for your freedom? Half of them sat down. He says, now, how many of you are willing to kill for your freedom? Another half sat down. Then he asked, how many of you are willing to kill some of the people in this room for your freedom? Because if you leave them behind, some of them are going to snitch on you. Now you got only 3 or 4 people standing up in a church of hundreds. Now the interesting thing is, Harriet Tubman figured this out a little earlier. She knew in order to go free that there were some people that she couldn't leave behind. And if you look at the history of Nat Turner, the reason they caught him was because a lot of people snitched on him. Now let's fast forward from my grandmother to my mother. I remember sitting down talking to my mother about life in the United States, and she talked to me about the racist Democrats. Now, you know how much black folks love Democrats. And the interesting thing is, if I recall, she started with Senator Bill Borrell. Now, I've not done a lot of research on Senator Bill Borrell, but my mother sat down and explained to me that most at that time were Republicans because the Democrats were the racists. Now, of course, later, I discovered Wallace, Faubus, Maddox, Helms. Now, here's a funny story. When George Wallace first ran, he ran as a progressive, and he lost his pants. The next time, he ran as a racist. Most who know George Wallace know that George Wallace's best friend was a black man throughout his life. Now, George Wallace did really crazy things. Not quite as bad as Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, but George Wallace just defied everything about government. Then he ran for president. Young people don't know George Wallace ran for president, and the first state he won was Indiana. George Wallace, a racist Democrat who ran as a progressive and lost his pants. We need to take a look at our history. And as we look at our history, we learn. I was fortunate that I didn't just have to go to my grandmother and my mother, but I went to my aunts, female teachers, because, black women were pretty different during my generation. And when I started raising my children, I tried to teach them what my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, and teachers of those days taught, because one thing a real black man understands is when the only thing you have is your family, your wife and your children in the United States, because nothing else is really worthwhile. They don't tell you the truth. They lie to you. They even teach you old white religion, for example. They give you everything the massa gave you. But mom and grandma and the ladies of those times, they sat down and told you the truth. I don't hear a lot of truth in the United States today. I see a lot of con jobs. But I love black women because black women made me the man I am today.